Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second VDart webinar that we're hosting today. Today's topic is Future of VMS, MSP Tech and Solutions during the COVID-19 pandemic. While we are going through this webinar, there should be a box available for you to submit your questions regarding the topic, and your questions will be answered at the end during our Q&A session. And of course, we are joined with our host today, that is Bruce Hay, the Vice President of Business Development here at VDart. Over to you, Bruce.
Good day to all, and we are delighted that you're here from around the globe attending this webinar on future VMS and MSP technologies and solutions during COVID-19. About VDart before we get started, VDart, we provide digital skills and beyond talent and solutions for Fortune 1000 companies, large consulting firms, systems integrators, and managed service providers, many who are on the call or on the webinar today. We are meeting the needs for leading technology skill sets, providing contingent temporary staff, contract to hire, permanent direct hire, as well as statement of work solutions across the stack of digital and disruptive technologies. Please contact us for more information. With that, let's get started with the panelists. And the first one to the left, Matt Moloney. Matt, good to have you. Matt has been in the contingent workforce space for 15 years. Over the course of his career, he's had hands-on and strategic experience in recruiting, sales, and operations. Over the last 8 years, Matt has been dedicated to the delivery of MSP and VMS solutions at FlexTrack. The FlexTrack VMS technology is built on Salesforce Lightning platform, and it gives customers and suppliers the ability to live in a completely next-generation ecosystem. FlexTrack VMS programs are able to leverage AI and machine learning, which we'll talk about later, to deliver access to suppliers and customers. My personal story with Matt is kind of interesting, how we met. Actually, FlexTrack attended our 2020 annual VDart kickoff in Atlanta, which many on the call have attended or spoken at. And Craig Fouts, one of his teammates, attended it. And Craig introduced me to Matt. And since that time, VDart's now supporting 4 FlexTrack customers in Canada and soon to be more. FlexTrack is one of the largest VMS MSPs in Canada. Welcome, Matt.
Great, thanks. Thanks for having me, Bruce. And obviously, before we get started, I just wanted to thank you for having me and thank Greg and Brian for joining the panel as well. I'm excited to hear their views. I don't know them very well, but I know their names and their resumes, and they're great thought leaders in the space. So I'm excited to hear from them as well.
Second panelist is Greg Fenton. Greg is a Senior Vice President at Workforce Logiq, responsible for the company's largest account. Greg joined Workforce Logiq in April of 2019 after prior experience at Tapfin, Kelly Services, and Brightfield Strategies. He got his start in the industry at Fieldglass, which is now owned by SAP and SAP Fieldglass, managing their largest global clients. Prior to jumping into this space, Greg spent time at Hewitt Associates, PwC, and Taleo, leading human capital technology transformations. Greg and I actually met through a mutual connection of Vanessa Lane. If Vanessa's on the call, thank you, Vanessa. She's the Supplier Diversity Manager at Cox Enterprises, and introduced me to Greg. And Greg was actually on the 2020 VDart annual kickoff. He was a speaker. And during the session, I was taking a lot of notes on what he said and the insights he talked about the technology that they're leveraging today. And I thought it was really relevant to the topic, and glad you're back to join us, Greg. Welcome.
Thanks, Bruce. Happy to be here with Brian and Matt. And for those on the phone, thank you for time out of your day to join us.
And then the third panelist is Brian Hoffmeyer. Brian's the Senior Vice President of Market Strategies for Beeline. Brian is the eyes, ears, voice, and anything else I could come up with in my brain for all the markets that Beeline serves. Brian listens to clients and prospects, analysts and partners, and then he works to incorporate their feedback into the organization's brand and products. Brian is also responsible for Beeline's MSP Talent Enterprise Software Partnerships programs. And congratulations, Brian, on your CCWP, the Certified Contingent Workforce Management Professional. It's a great honor that you have that. And Brian's got 15 years of experience or more in the industry. My relationship with Brian actually started shortly after I got into the staffing industry in 2005. And I immediately was humbled and impressed with his knowledge and strategic insights when our company and their company would meet and talk. And regularly, Brian's been asked to be a speaker and panelist with different industry topics, and has a lot to offer here today. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks very much, Bruce. Really looking forward to it. I think, I'm a lot of the senses of Beeline. I'm not the nose of Beeline. That's someone else. So, but yeah, look forward to the discussion today.
Love it. Let's see. Let's move on to question 1. For the next decade, we believe that temporary gig workers shall be the new norm. We see a strategic shift from standard solution delivery to a more strategic just-in-time staffing models. How is your technology evolving to ensure you cater to the current and future needs of your customers, especially as it relates to statement of work, gig, and total workforce solutions? Let me start off with you, Brian.
So first off, I agree completely with the statement about the new normal. That's a phrase I've come to really despise during COVID, because there's a lot of things about the new normal that aren't great. But I think companies will continue to use contingent workers in an increasing pace, and a lot of that, when we talk to our clients, it's driven by the need for what they call talent agility. They need access to talent that is not part of their staff in order to deliver on new kinds of projects, on the ubiquitous digital transformation that we talk about so much that's being pursued by companies of all types. And so they need different skill sets, and contingent work is a great way to do it. In terms of how we're evolving, I think there's a couple of different things that Beeline specifically is doing. One is that we're working to give hiring managers and MSP partners the tool sets needed to evaluate these candidates as they come in, so they can make the right decisions about who they bring in. And that takes 2 forms. One is, especially in the case of technical resources, does the person have the technical chops to do the job that you're bringing them in for? Are they, if they're saying they're a data scientist, how do you know that? And then secondly is, are they going to fit into your culture? That's something that's become very, very important to our clients and to Beeline. It's not good enough that somebody can do the job. It's about how they do the job as well. And so we're giving them tools to help assess that personality fit, to make sure that the person is going to fit into their culture, that they're gonna complement it, that they're gonna work in the style that the manager and their team is looking for. And I think, sort of doing those same kinds of things for contractors and gig workers that you would do for a full-time employee is going to become increasingly important.
Yeah, great.
The other thing we're doing is we're working to give. The other thing we're doing is making sure that our clients have access to all of these different sources of talent. We strongly believe that there's many different ways to engage talent, and clients need to take advantage of all of them, ranging from their traditional supply base to various gig economy platforms. And they need to be looking at both a strategic and a tactical level. How should work get done? Strategically, some of it's, what's my company's philosophy about what work should be done by our permanent employees versus what work should be outsourced. But then also taking into account, economic conditions. And then on an individual assignment level, when a manager needs something done, helping them make that decision about that particular piece of work, and giving them all the different methods, ranging from, bringing in a single person all the way up, I should outsource an entire scope of work via our services solution.
A little bit there, Brian. But thanks, Brian. Hopefully you can hear us fine. Greg, let's get your thoughts.
Sorry,
I think
lost.
Go ahead, Brian. Brian made some great points. The culture and access piece certainly will have a significant difference in the quote unquote new normal. I would say, I don't know Matt product and services as well as I do Beelines, but I'd say that, companies like ours are not catering, if you will, to the current and future needs, but actually I think leading. And a lot of that lead comes from the projects and the efforts that our clients are trying to get their arms around with the changes in our current environment. By that, I mean, how do we manage our project? Do we keep it in flight or do we cancel it for cost savings measures? What are our priorities? Our focus has become more of a multi-channel approach with gig, contingent labor, contingent workers, i.e. staff aug, as well as how we help our clients better manage the SOW and professional services resources that come in for some of these larger, more complex projects. I have seen a renewed interest in nearshoring. So Brian talked about access. That's obviously not completely a part of his culture comment, but the access, the multi-channel, making data-driven decisions. Where should we actually now do this work? Does it make sense to do the traditional offshoring model? Does nearshore give us a little bit more control, less risk? Or is this something where we've got clients that have furloughed thousands of employees in one case? Do those furloughed employees come back, or do we bring them back as a contractor? Do we replace them with a contractor? So I think the tip of the spear is definitely going to be contractor as we get into the recovery, whether that's a V-shaped or a swoosh-shaped. Our attempts over the last 18 months with our top clients have been to bring in talent platforms that make sense and can assess things differently. And this is different than Brian's comment around culture, but where can we do the best work at the best price, and does location actually really matter? And we're finding obviously that it does now. And I'll make one more point about the data. Without it, we all talk about it, but without it, you're sort of dead in the water. You can't lead your client to the right spot if the data, if you don't have a frictionless way of getting the data to the client and tell the right story and help them make some decisions around things like nearshoring versus offshoring versus FTE and contractors. So we've almost redesigned our platform over the last 18 months to bring in some of that optimization and assessment tool approach, but more so on the data than the culture.
It doesn't surprise me. You and data go hand in hand. So, Matt, your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks, Brian and Greg, for your thoughts. I couldn't agree more with kind of the track that you guys were going down. And I think it's going to kind of lend itself into my thoughts here as well. And when you think about what we at Procom and FlexTrack think about, kind of question one, we're like Brian and Greg, we agree 100%. We see this as an exponential growth curve. We've been talking about this for years. By 2020, or 2025, half the market is going to be contingent. We've been saying all these things for so long, and we think that, COVID, with the disruptive nature of it to our workforce, it's going to continue and get even greater. It's really changing not only where we're all working, but also how we're working. And in a lot of cases, if we're working at all. And those folks that have been restructured out or furloughed, et cetera, a lot of those folks are looking for new ways to engage with brands, whether that's becoming a gig worker, whether that's looking at new ways for them to engage and freelance, et cetera. So how do we address the shift? Very similar to what Greg said, actually. FlexTrack as a VMS has been in the market for 12, 15 years, but over the last year and a half, we really went through a complete redesign. And as Bruce mentioned at the outset, we've put our entire VMS stack on the Salesforce Lightning platform. What that does for us is really a few different things. And what we're trying to do to address this question specifically really lends itself to a native ecosystem that includes all aspects of the potential workforce, time and materials, SAO, gig, etc. What we're trying to do, and when we talk about native technology versus integrated technology, what we're trying to do when we're talking about native technology is make sure that all of these different components are actually built into the tool itself as opposed to going to third parties. But at the same time, we have to be able to provide our customers the ability to integrate technologies, platforms that they already have in their environments today. That in order for us to be successful, we need to kind of marry those two together, really understand what is best of breed. To Brian's point, what is the technology stack that's actually going to fit the culture of the organization? How is an organization hiring workers today, and what does an organization need to do to hire them in the future? For us, we have the ability to access the Salesforce App Exchange. So for instance, our SAO, people have always called it SAO modules, but the SAO inside of our system is actually DocuSign CLM, gives us all of our versioning control, gives us all of our redlining control. We have gig, direct sourcing, all of that built into our platform, but we also have the ability to touch best of breed direct sourcing or FMS tools to really start to bring all of that together. One of the biggest challenges that we see as we start to go down this path of the future of work is the blurred lines between time and materials resources, SAO resources, gig resources. How are we engaging them? How are we bringing them into our marketplace? And the solution really comes down to, and Greg kind of mentioned this as well, is that AI, machine learning, data-driven single pane of glass to account for all of these different decisions that have to be made by program owners. And Salesforce gives us that ability to be able to drive all of the Einstein, and if you know Salesforce, you'll know Einstein Analytics. Einstein Analytics is a partnership between Salesforce and Google to drive AI and machine learning, and we're actually bringing all of that to bear now for our customers across our customer base and our supply base as well. And again, I think that Brian and Greg hit it on the head that data is the future. Data is what's going to allow us to be able to make these decisions, and bringing that AI and machine learning, understanding market-driven dynamics, understanding different types of workers, where the value is to the customer. This is what the future of work looks like in kind of the post-COVID world, to me anyway.
Great response. And actually that ties into question number 2, if we can slide over to that. And I don't know if there's anything you want to add to this question too, Matt, before Greg and Brian chime in, but you talked about here the respective technology utilizing the digitalization, the user interfaces, and your AI and machine learning. Anything else you would like to add to these question number 2 that maybe you didn't touch on?
Yeah, absolutely. You're just going to let me keep going, eh?
So you kind of flowed right into it. So.
All right, I was on a roll. I like it. Yeah, and I think, and probably, I think that Greg made a great point. That as VMS providers in the market, I mean, we need to be leaders in this space, and I feel like as an industry, as peers and colleagues on this panel, I think that we're doing a great job of doing it, and I think that part of being here today is thought leadership, and hopefully some people can take a piece from Greg and Brian and myself as they go back into their programs. But I do think that our industry has been ripe for disruption for years. I think that COVID is definitely accelerating the need for that disruption, and I think that when you start thinking, and Greg had kind of started to go down this path around rate data, how we can start to look at like-for-like candidates in different markets, and not just markets in the US, but the US versus Canada, the US versus the UK, I was having a conversation yesterday with a customer who their entire business is around the college and universities and working in a back to work strategy for colleges and universities. And they have people all over the globe, and they need to figure out a way in order to bring costs down and allow access. And I think, you know, this is what we as a panel are trying to solve for, is not only how do we figure this out from a rate perspective, but also how do we figure this out from a quality perspective as well. And if we can start to look at rate data, then we can also start to look at quantifiable supplier and supply-based management data to allow for us to ensure that we're looking at the best suppliers in those locations, irregardless of a vendor's list or the like. And I think that when you start to look at the second part of this question, which is fraudulent candidates from joining the workforce, I think that what we've done on our end, and this again is going to lend itself back to Salesforce, is the ability for us to be able to build partnerships native inside of our VMS. So I already kind of mentioned DocuSign lives inside of our VMS. LinkedIn also lives natively inside of our VMS. And although there's no silver bullet to really eliminate the risk of fraudulent candidates, what we're trying to do is we're trying to create almost a multi-factor authentication that you would have on your computer, on your iPhone or your Android device when it comes to screening. So being able to do multi-factor authentication, and Bruce, I'm not going to do a good job here. I don't know the product as well as I probably should, but I know that one of the things that you and I have talked about is the vValidate product at VDart, and bringing these types of partnerships together where we can use the vValidate to validate H-1Bs in a matter of minutes. Having the ability for an MSP program manager to look at a resume and the LinkedIn profile of that candidate at the exact same time to validate experience across the board, to have a partnership native inside of our VMS that not only is a video interviewing software, but is also a machine learning and AI facial recognition software that allows us to drive data points in ways that we've never been able to do before. So I think that we're ripe for disruption. I think the folks on this panel are doing a great job to help that disruption along. But those are some of the things that we're doing on the FlexTrack VMS side to try to drive some of that fraud risk reduction, but also the AI and the machine learning.
That's very interesting and awesome to hear. I learned a few more new things that I didn't know. Brian, are you able to connect back in? Let's go to Greg.
Thanks, Matt. Nice summary. And it's pretty interesting to hear the native approach that you guys are taking. You know, our product is definitely evolving to address the general screening candidate question. Our integration with a company, we acquired a company by the name of Engage Talent. That has worked extremely well for us in our ability to identify candidates that are likely to be contingent. Generally, that platform was born to address full-time candidate searches, but now we've been able to develop an algorithm that helps us look at folks that might be likely to engage, if you will, as a contingent worker. Leveraging AI to look at location optimization. We talked at the top around helping our clients decide where they want to do the work and how to do the work. That we're finding that we're getting some great traction helping clients understand how to answer the where question a lot more accurately. From a day-to-day perspective, just released or soon to be released, we actually have introduced a unique identifier, probably close to industry standard, if not a little bit ahead, where we can help our clients track the folks that actually come into their organization a lot differently. This isn't your typical resource tracking kind of module or approach, but the unique identifier allows us to ensure that regardless of the channel that a person comes into an organization, we're able to track that person and their rates and their roles on a more accurate basis. So for example, if I come in as a project manager in 2019 at a rate of $125 an hour, and then that same firm brings me back 6 months later at $225, we have the ability to help the client understand why that rate might change, and is it a valid change? And if not, help them derive some cost savings by having a different conversation with that particular provider. I think we'll see a lot more in this industry around, to Matt's point about being able to identify folks much more cleanly up front, so that back-end tracking actually becomes a lot more smooth.
Thanks for that insight, Greg. Let's move on to the third question. This has been a hot topic on a lot of webinars I've been on in our industry when we're on direct sourcing. But as insourcing and right fit delivery models take precedence, have you partnered with clients to make recommendations on suppliers? And can you talk about some case studies that have resulted in joint value partnerships? Maybe Matt, and we'll check if Brian's back.
Yeah, sure. So, so us on the FlexTrack side, because we do provide both MSP and VMS services, this is, you know, an area for us. Supply-based management becomes, you know, like you said, Bruce, it's a hot topic, and it's something that we're continually trying to address. And supply-based management in and of itself was an area that was ripe for disruption as well. And I think when you look at historically, and I'm sure Greg is probably going to go down the same path here as me, but you know, when you start looking at kind of historically how supply bases were managed, they were managed kind of in a bubble. So supplier or customer A had a supply-based manager, customer B had a supply-based manager, customer C had a supply-based manager, and each one of those supply-based managers kind of had their own relationships and their own favorites, and a lot of decisioning around who was a supplier and who wasn't a supplier weren't always quantitative decisions. A lot of them were qualitative decisions, a lot of them were historical decisions. And so what we've really been focused on, and I'm going to go back to that single pane of glass, what we've really been focused on across our supply base is trying to, again, drive the right amount of data to be able to sit in front of a customer with quantifiable data by skill set, by location, and be able to really create a vendor ecosystem that allows for that level of flexibility, be it at the integrator level, consulting firm level, staffing level, gig worker, freelancer, etc., and really be able to drive the right level of data-driven decisioning around who those suppliers are. So we're being asked all the time, not just at supplier or at RFP supplier refresh times. We're being asked all the time, who should we be looking at? We've opened a new delivery center in X location. We've acquired a new company. What should we be doing? And I think, and I'm not just plugging you here, Bruce, because you put on the webinar, but you know, I think one of the case studies is actually VDart, and you know, we did a lot of quantitative analysis of VDart and the work that you've been doing in other programs, and then we brought you into one program, again, validated the data, ensured that we had in effect made the right decision, and then started to go customer by customer across the board at each point in time, making sure that the data that we were getting was the right data and gave us the right result. And to be honest, if the data hadn't given us the results that we were looking for, we wouldn't have continued to bring you guys into multiple programs. So everything that we're trying to do now is all single pane of glass and all data driven.
humbled and blessed to be a supplier and extension of your guys' programs and brands. Greg, I'm going to try to reach out Brian on his cell. Go ahead, Greg.
Sure, thanks. We're also a VMS MSP, and we have several clients, though, that as an MSP use different technologies. And I think the first rule of thumb that I try to take, and we've tried to take in the last couple of years, is what are the critical success factors for a supplier relationship within our client universe, and then providing the right data to help them make those decisions. We have a client that recently went through a pretty significant review of their suppliers, but took the right amount of time and a data-driven approach to make sure that they knew what they were looking at, the data they were looking at, that it was relevant, timely, recent. You got to always weave in the context and the nuances of the experiences that they have with suppliers, as well as how the MSP interacts with that supplier. Overall, we try to stay away from an MSP perspective, we try to stay away from making recommendations, but we have gone through and revamped our entire supplier scorecard methodology. It's now part of our IQ Analytics platform, which is our data platform, allowing our clients to make some pretty nimble decisions based on real-time data, as opposed to the massive undertaking of your traditional supplier optimization effort. I think moving forward, what the trends we're seeing is some of that insourcing or direct sourcing, leveraging the tools more in partnership with suppliers, rather than just having the suppliers. That traditional model is definitely morphing. I think it's healthy for both sides, but it's definitely being driven by the improvements in the technology. We use the term disruption all the time, and it's almost overused, right? The idea being that these tools should be driving the decisions versus a lot of back-end work trying to help a client make a decision on a supplier. It really comes down to the delivery model. I mentioned the multi-talent approach at the top. How do they want to get that talent? Where do they want to get that talent? Do they have the tools to make some of those decisions? And how do the suppliers help lead the way?
Let's move on to question 4 as we get closer to open Q&A in about 15 minutes with the audience. How have your respective organizations responded to customers' unique and emergent workforce needs, I'll say during, as opposed to post, but COVID-19 pandemic, because we still seem to be in this situation? And have your own business models, supply chains evolved? And what do you think are the major adjustments all customers may need to do to their workforce strategies in the coming year, 2020, 2021? Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. And another great question. And we were chatting about this question before the webinar actually started, and we were having a conversation of whether that it should have been post or during COVID-19. So, when I look at this and our team looks at this, we really see this as a multifaceted approach. And I really like what Greg had said earlier in the conversation, as as VMS is trying to lead, digital transformation historically hasn't necessarily included the workforce. It is now. We're excited by that, and we're excited about what that leads down the road for us as leaders in the space. So what do we do, and what are the trends and business models that we're seeing? Well, first of all, as a VMS, what we're trying to do is we're trying to figure out ways that we can help our customers get back to work safely. That's first and foremost, and being part of the Salesforce ecosystem, we are using work.com. If you've had a chance to look at work.com, it is the Salesforce back to work platform, dashboard, contract tracing, all of that rolled into, again, one kind of single pane of glass. So we're using that with some of our customers now to help them reopen safely. That would be step 1. And then step 2, and Greg really kind of nailed this on the last question, is really how do we build the right workflows and the right assignment management capability for an organization in order to be able to take advantage of these new and disruptive technologies, be that direct sourcing, be that freelancer management systems, etc., and help our customers really evolve their supply chains from the moment that a requisition is created all the way through, and we've already kind of talked about screening of candidates, but all the way through how organizations are engaging these folks, how they're paying these folks. And for us, being in the Salesforce ecosystem, it allows us the ability to do multifaceted approaches. So we've partnered with organizations like Textio. If you don't know Textio is a natural language processing organization that allows us to score job descriptions, both along the lines of geographical relevance, but also diversity. Allows us to ensure that all of the job descriptions that a customer is putting out to market meet the needs of historically underrepresented folks in the ecosystem. We partner with folks like Quill to provide payment optionality for individuals, diversity suppliers, etc. And then being able to blend all of this together, to Greg's point, and create a supply and assignment management protocol that is going to allow a customer to be able to figure out the right person in the right job at the right time, and obviously at the right rate. And one of the core components that we've really built out in the last 6 to 8 months is the decision wizard for the Salesforce platform. And historically, a decision wizard, it's nothing new. We've all talked about it in the past, but historical decision wizards have been driven by managers. Managers know the person that they want to engage, and they're able to almost game the decision wizard in order to get the right person through the mechanism that they want. And what we've done is we've kind of flipped the script and created an AI version on that single pane of glass to be able to look at all of the data and really inform supply chain, procurement, and the manager based on the parameters of what the manager is looking for. The right method for them to engage this resource is X, and that could be SAO, that could be direct source, that could be time and materials suppliers, that could be payroll, whatever the data is telling the system. We can actually now push the manager as opposed to the manager pushing the decision wizard. So that's kind of some of the things that we're looking at. But I think that, you know, Greg really nailed this on the last one. It's all about assignment management. It's all about making sure that the customer has all of the things that they need in order to access the talent the right way.
Thanks, Matt.
Hey, Bruce.
Brian.
Yeah, just wanted to let you know Brian is back online.
Brian. Did you go hiking in the mountains? Are you there?
Yeah, I'm not sure what happened there. Sorry about that. My connectivity said it was good, but everything just disappeared. So it took me a little bit to get back. So hopefully you can hear me okay now.
Yeah, we can. We're on question 4. Do you have some thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I was just listening, and I disagree with everything the other panelists have been saying. We've also been focused on helping our clients do some pretty basic things around, you know, they've had to adjust, right? You know, many of our clients are large organizations that didn't historically have a tradition of remote work. They insisted work take place in the offices, and they had to shift very quickly, not only for their contingent workforces, but their own workforces to an all remote model. And so there was, you know, a lot of rapid decision making that had to go on, you know, and figuring out how this was going to work. And regarding the contingent workforce, you know, particularly, we worked to roll out some standard fields very quickly so they could track on a requisition by requisition and assignment by assignment basis that particular job could be done remotely, and if so, you know, what were the tools needed, the equipment needed to do that. And so that really clients just kind of get their hands around their workforce in a new way, you know, sort of going with this new normal. As part of that, I think the other big trend we've seen is that clients are realizing that something that we've all said in the industry. I'm sure that both Greg and Matt have said this for years, that you have to track all of your contingent workers, no matter what kind of worker they are, where they work, what they do. And many clients don't. Many clients don't have a good idea of who their contractors are and what they're doing. They've got part of it captured, and then some of it's still tracked in spreadsheets and things like that. And so we're seeing this tremendous uptick in making sure that you've got it all captured, so that you can tell, who are my workers, where are they healthy, are they able to work? And that's been a big trend. So we're seeing, clients very quickly adopt solutions like services procurement, statement of work management, resource tracking for their cafeteria workers and security guards, and people that are still accessing facilities even when those facilities are partly shut down. And so they're just trying to get their hands around their contingent workforce in a way they haven't in the past. And that's certainly something that's welcome to us, because I think it's been a soapbox that I know I've climbed on for many years, and I think many of the others I talk to in the industry have too. So that's definitely been a big adjustment. And the clients on the line, the buyers on the line, if you haven't figured out how to track all of your non-employee workforce, you need to do that now.
Good inputs. Greg, anything in a minute or so to add to this before we move to the last question?
Quickly, I guess maybe from another lens, when we had some pretty significant clients make some pretty significant cuts to their contingent workforce, and we sort of tried to help them lead with some of those pivots by keeping in touch with those contingent workers that had been asked to stop work. We focused on building out a different type of talent community focused on displaced workers. We looked at, we got every MSP and VMS wants a seat at the table when it comes to hiring plans, and we've been able to do that. We've seen our competitors and our partners do the same thing when it comes to return to work plans and resource allocation. We stopped on a dime, created our IQ location optimizer. Again, going back to that, where are we going to do that? Would this work next, if we do it at all? And I'll also throw in the Quill. Matt mentioned Quill. Folks like that are making payments easier in an attempt to reduce some financial stress for the supplier base. And I've talked to them a couple of times in some of their case studies where they've stepped up to keep suppliers whole and solvent. So that's always helpful to your business, right? I think Brian's point on tracking those workers, it's funny that we still have some of these conversations about resource tracking, but it's very true. A lot of clients still have a handle on that. And I'm not here to sell a product. I'll reinforce what Brian said, get your arms around it, because you will mitigate a tremendous amount of risk, and really actually at the end of this whole thing, whenever that is, probably create some pretty good opportunities for your business to do, to engage these workers on a much different plane and better.
And I'm going to go ahead and do a quick shout out. Yeah, here. You guys are all mentioning Quill, and Quill was one of the sponsors at our annual kickoff. Derek Sanders, for anybody who is looking for more information on Quill and the innovative solution that they have, can reach out to me or reach out on LinkedIn to Derek Sanders. Great resource and a great service they offer. Let's move on to question 5. COVID-19, what do you believe shall drive companies to VMS technologies? And I think you've kind of been answering that along the way here very well. And then also, what are some areas of partnership that you would be looking for in your supplier network? And I know we have some staffing suppliers on this webinar as well. I'm sure this is a question near and dear to their hearts. Let's start off with Brian.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think in terms of the first part, in terms of what will drive companies to VMS, it's ultimately getting their hands around the right combination of cost, quality, and timeliness regarding their workforce. I think that's what all of us in this ecosystem, the VMS is the MSP SVPs, the suppliers that are on the phone call, and the buyers need to collaborate on and create tools. And I think ultimately that's the decision clients are looking for, because it lets them make flexible decisions as economic things change. I mean, a classic example I think a lot of us always use is oil and gas, and look at how that industry changes, kind of how they manage that particular triangle of cost, quality, and timeliness depending on the price of oil. And I think we're going to continue to see that, especially depending, I love the comment someone made earlier about whether the recovery is V-shaped or swoosh shaped. Nobody, if any of us could predict the shape of the recovery, we would all be, rich people, sitting somewhere not doing this, I guess. But, I think that's going to continue to be what we experience as we go through whatever happens next in the world economy. I think around supplier partnership, one of the things I want to focus on, someone mentioned earlier, we're talking about talent diversity, and that's just incredibly important now more than ever. I've done a lot of reading around the importance of talent diversity, even prior to kind of these recent events. And simply put, diverse teams win. They do better, have better results. And it's not enough just to have supplier diversity. You need to be focused on true talent diversity, and I think that's something that the supplier network should be really focused on doing. How am I going to help increase talent diversity? How am I going to help the disadvantaged to get meaningful employment? Because ultimately, I strongly believe that ends up helping everyone, both sort of an economic basis, but in terms of a societal one as well.
Yeah, Greg.
I'll take the last question first, and not to, Brian, I think hit the nail right on the head. Diversity is going to win every single time, and I would love to be able to better partner with our supplier network and our clients. They're asking for the help, and I think we can leverage the tools that we have plus the relationships. It's probably more about relationships than the tool. To bring more diverse talent to bear and have a much more positive impact on the workforce, the culture, and ultimately business results. From the first question, what's driving companies to the VMS technologies? It's getting your arms around your total workforce. We've all talked about total talent management for a long time, and I say the same thing over and over again. And I don't even think my kids listen to me now, but it's getting kind of long in the tooth. So how do you bridge those tools, VMS, to help a client understand the competitive advantage that they get, understanding the contingent workforce, whether it's staff aug or professional services or gig. And I think our platforms give them insights that they generally don't have. A lot of these FTEs will not come back in the same shape and form. Not that they won't come back, but it's very, very different. And that workforce management and the coalition of resources really needs to come to bear through these systems. And I think we're well poised to continue the disruption. It's going to be messy. I think we'll have better results as a result.
I see we're getting a lot of questions coming in. So Matt, could you take maybe 60 seconds on this one, and then we're going to get into some open questions from the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest, I don't really have a whole lot to add on this. I mean, I love sitting here and listening to Brian and Greg talk about the community that we're trying to build. I think it's absolutely incredible. And, I think a lot of times we, not only in the VMS space, but also in the supplier community. I grew up as a recruiter and account manager in the supplier world, and I think a lot of times we forget the impact that we're actually having on people's bottom line, the ability for them to put food on their table and to grow their careers. And I love hearing Brian and Greg talk about building that community, continuing to drive that innovation, and that's really what we're looking for from our supplier network is a group of people that are rowing in the boat the same way, trying to build the common good, and trying to build a community. In terms of what's driving VMS, Greg nailed it. Brian nailed it. It's data. It's total talent management. But Greg, Brian, good on you guys. Happy to hear the work that you guys are doing to build the community.
Very, very good. Well, I know how competitive the three of you guys are, so we've got a poll question here. Which speaker did the best? So, audience, we're going to use data and science to prove this question out. Avi, give it about 5 more seconds, then we'll open the Q&A. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Survey results. Oh, well, holy cow. Wow, great job. You all had 100%. I love it. Well, you know how we like to have a little bit of fun around here at VDart. Let's put you in the firing round. Avi, what are some questions? Good ones we got.
Yeah, Bruce. So one of the first questions we have is how are MSPs checking if their suppliers have a business continuity plan and are able to support their customers?
First.
I'll take a stab at that. That's a fantastic question, and one that pre-COVID-19 probably wasn't considered much. I've seen mixed results. Mixed meaning there are some suppliers that have brought those forward without being asked. Others we go to, or the clients have got some kind of conversation going with the suppliers already directly in some cases. It is something that moving forward, our key clients have asked us to track just like we would state licenses or other kind of certifications as we track as we do today in the VMS.
Yeah, I think that's key to it is use the tools that you already have available. We've seen a similar change in how onboarding checklists and things like that are used, because there's all kinds of new steps, and so there's use the technology you've got.
Yeah, and I would agree on my end as well. I mean, I think that we're starting to see a lot of our customers ask for more due diligence in certain areas around business continuity. And I agree with Greg and Brian. I mean, use the technology you have. Don't shy away from doing the due diligence, and make sure that there's that everyone in the supply chain is protected.
It's more important than continuity plans. So, and hats off to our VDart team for ours and how quickly we mobilized and no disruption to our business. So, next question, Avi.
Yes. What are the top, 1 to 2 changes which you've seen in the VMS world as a result of this pandemic? If you had to narrow it down to the top 2.
Start.
I think.
Sorry, who was that going to start?
Go ahead, Brian.
Good.
Or Brian.
I was just going to say, I think we've talked about one of them, around making sure you're tracking all of your workers. I think the other big one is that we've seen lots of clients look at tracking all of the people that they've furloughed or let go, whether they're full-time or contingent workers, and putting those folks into a talent pool they're staying in touch with, so that as jobs start to reopen, that's the first place they go, because those folks have known quality, right? They can do a good job for you, and so maybe you rehire former employees as contractors, and using those kinds of talent pools is definitely a trend we're seeing.
I'd say the same talent pools, and I think this almost sounds like it's table stakes, but it's surprising how often we get tangled up in bad data. But having that data so these businesses can make decisions and prioritize their work, whether it's a project I talked about at the top, in flight or not, being prepared to make some quick decisions, and clients can't make those calls without accurate data. I know it sounds like a broken record. We've all been talking about it for 20 years, but we've really invested in how we share our data with clients, and that has paid off in spades in a couple of them. So keeping that as a supplier, making sure that your stuff is accurate and we're supporting you as an MSP, and then that easily translates to better data within the VMS for better.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, I would agree with both of those. You know, data is key. Data rules the day, and you know, we're using our VMS because it's on Salesforce as a marketing platform, as well as the VMS. So we're creating those talent pools like Brian was talking about, and creating a marketing engine behind it to stay in touch with folks and make sure that those folks that are furloughed, that are laid off, are getting the right brand, getting their arms wrapped around by the brand of their employer or of their partner a little bit better. Make sure that they feel good about the fact that there is an opportunity for them down the road to come back.
We've got time for a couple more, I believe.
All right. This question, I think it comes from a person you guys might have met or might have heard about. His name is Sid. He's the CEO of VDart. His question is for you guys. Specifically, in which industries are you seeing suppliers getting challenged the most during COVID-19, and what challenges are they? So industries.
I guess I'll say this from two perspectives. One, you know, in financial services, that's an industry where we've seen tremendous uptick in the use of contingent labor, and so I'm seeing suppliers get challenged to fill, in some cases, hundreds of recs for people doing loan processing for small business loans, for example, very, very quickly. So that's one side of things, and the other is it's cliched, but oil and gas, you know, so hard hit that, you know, the challenge is, can I deliver a quality resource at a lower cost?
Greg, anything to add?
I think, yeah, some of the challenges we've seen within our universe, and it's no surprise because everybody's experiencing it, but travel and transportation potentially including automotive. So there's a lot of downside there right now. We've got some clients that are in the telecom and cable businesses, and their business has gone up as a result of the demands that consumers have working from home, increased bandwidth, additional services, etc. So two sides, tale of two cities with challenges, some of them positive, obviously some not.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, I think oil and gas definitely comes top of mind, getting hit twice, right? Also, you know, COVID plus, you know, the general market itself presents massive challenges. The other one isn't necessarily an industry specific, but the one that really we've spent a lot of time trying to manage better is light industrial. So there are a lot of essential workers in that space. So we're seeing an uptick in the demand, but we're also seeing challenges that the suppliers are having to go through to ensure that those folks are doing their work safely and are able to, you know, get back to their families safely at the end of the day. And so that's been very challenging for a lot of suppliers, is positive tests and contact tracing and trying to figure out who has been in contact with who, and the light industrial space has definitely been challenging, although there's definitely been an uptick in the usage of contractors across the board.
Maybe, Avi, is there one where each of these panelists could take 20 seconds to answer? Is there one in there?
Yeah, I think the last question we had is, could you elaborate on the first question? I guess somebody had mentioned talent agility. Could you elaborate what is talent agility?
Yeah, that was me. It's probably a bit of a buzzword, but it's getting quick access to types of talent that I don't traditionally have as part of my makeup. So for example, a number of our financial services clients are going through digital transformations to shift from on-premise banking to using apps and things like that. And they need access to high-end app developers and data scientists in a way that you wouldn't traditionally expect a bank to. You'd expect that of a software company. And so, ultimately many companies are acting like software companies now, and they need quick access to new kinds of talent as new technologies come into play. So that's what I meant.
Well, I just want to take a minute here to say thank you on behalf of all the attendees for the three of you being on here today, sharing your insights. Obviously, you can click on the next final slide here. If anybody wants to connect with us or wants more information, or I can help facilitate discussions with the three of these fine panelists, reach out to me at bruce.hay@vdartinc.com. Look for some more webinars coming up in the near future, and have a wonderful weekend. Thank you all. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yes, and to all the attendees, thank you for joining, and we will let you know about the next webinar that we'll be hosting.